All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling a really important tool in the world of commercial real estate, one that can take a huge financial burden and flip it into a strategic advantage. We're talking about the commercial sublease.
So let's paint a picture. Imagine your business has shifted. Maybe you've gone remote or you've downsized, but you're still locked into this long-term lease for office space you don't even need anymore. That rent check every single month, man, it feels like you're just lighting cash on fire. It's a massive headache. But what if there was another way?
Well, that's exactly where subleasing enters the picture. It's all about taking that empty, expensive space, that huge liability, and turning it into a solution that could literally save your company a ton of money.
Okay, so what is a sublease really? Think of it like a lease inside of another lease. You, the original tenant, you kind of become a landlord yourself. You rent out your space to a new person, the subleasee. But your original contract with the actual landlord, what's called the master lease, stays totally in place.
And this is where things get a little more complex. See, this isn't just a simple two-way street. A sublease creates this triangle of relationships. It's not just you and the new guy. Nope, there are three key players involved here. This chart lays it out perfectly. Look at how it works. You've got the landlord connected to you, the original tenant, through that master lease. Then you're connected to the new tenant, the sublessee, through the sublease itself. But, and this is the key, look at that gap at the bottom. There is no direct legal line between the landlord and your sublessee. Honestly, if you remember one thing about this structure, make it this.
You know, a lot of people mix up subleasing with something called assigning a lease, but they are worlds apart. With a sublease, you're still the middleman. And, super important, you keep all the original risk. An assignment, that's when you completely hand over your lease to someone else, and they deal directly with the landlord. It's kind of like this. Subleasing is renting out a room in your apartment, while assigning is getting someone to completely take over your entire apartment lease.
Okay, so let's say you found the perfect subtenant. Awesome. But hold on. You can't just shake hands and give him the keys. Nope. First, you have to get past the biggest gatekeeper in this whole process, the landlord. Everything you need to know is buried in your original lease. There will be a clause in there about subletting. Now, sometimes, though it's rare, it's just flat out forbidden. More often, you'll see something like sole discretion, which basically means the landlord can say no just because they feel like it. What you really want to see is language like consent not to be unreasonably withheld. That gives you power, because it means they need a good, solid business reason to turn you down.
So what counts as a reasonable reason for them to say no? Well, pretty common sense stuff, actually. Like if your proposed subtenant has terrible credit, that's a red flag. Or maybe they want to do something that's against the building rules, putting a loud workshop in a building full of accountants. Another big one is if their business directly competes with another tenant who already has a deal for exclusivity.
But landlords have another trick up their sleeve, and it's a big one. It's called a recapture right. Get this, if you do all the hard work and find an amazing subtenant who's willing to pay top dollar, the landlord can just swoop in, terminate your lease, and sign a brand new one directly with the person you brought to the table. They completely cut you out and keep all the extra profit. Yeah, it's definitely something you have to look out for in your lease.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the money and the risk. Because with any sublease, you're always trying to balance what you could gain against some pretty serious potential downsides. How it all shakes out financially really just comes down to the market. It's pretty straightforward. In a hot market, you might actually make a profit by charging more rent than you pay. If the market's just okay, you'll probably break even, which is still a win. But if it's a weak market, you're probably going to have to offer a discount, meaning you're still paying some rent every month, but hey, you're losing less money.
And here's another thing. Let's say you do hit the jackpot in a strong market and you're making a profit. Well, don't pop the champagne just yet. A lot of leases have what's called a profit-sharing clause. This means the landlord gets to take a slice of your profits, and it can be a big slice, sometimes up to 50% of everything you make over your original rent. Okay, but all of that, the profits, the clauses, it's all secondary to the single most important thing you need to understand. Let me be crystal clear. You are still on the hook, 100%. If your subtenant decides to stop paying rent, guess who has to pay? You do. If they trash the place, that's your problem. Their mistake immediately becomes your financial nightmare. All right, I know that sounds pretty terrifying, but it doesn't have to be a train wreck.
there are absolutely ways for everyone involved to protect themselves. You, the new tenant, and even the landlord. So let's talk about some smart moves. So if you're the one moving in, the subleasee, there's a powerful document you're going to want to know about. It's called an SNDA. It's basically a separate agreement between all three parties. And what it does is create a safety net for the subleasee. It says that if the original tenant messes up and gets evicted, the landlord can't just kick the subleasee out too. It's a huge piece of protection.
Now, if you're the one trying to sublet your space, you have to start thinking like a landlord. What does that mean? It means getting a solid security deposit. It means demanding proof of insurance. And it means drilling it into your head that you are still the one on the line for everything. And please, please have a lawyer review every single document.
And for the sublessee moving in, it's all about due diligence. You absolutely have to read that master lease because all those rules, they apply to you now. You should also investigate the financial health of the person you're subleasing from. The last thing you want is for them to go belly up, and like we just talked about, really push to get that SNDA in place. It's your best defense.
And what about the landlord? Well, they're just protecting their investment, right? They do that by putting all these rules, like the recapture right and profit sharing, into the lease from the very beginning. And you can bet they're going to vet your subtenant just as carefully as they vetted you. For them, it's all about keeping the building full of reliable, quality tenants.
Okay, so let's pull back from the individual deals for a second and look at the big picture. Because the amount of sublease space out there in a city, that's more than just a bunch of one-off agreements. It's actually a really powerful signal about the economy.
When a ton of sublease space suddenly floods the market, real estate folks call it shadow space. And usually, it's a huge warning sign for the economy. It means businesses are shrinking or shutting down, which creates a glut of office space. But here's the flip side. If you're a tenant looking for a new spot, a market full of shadow space can be an incredible opportunity to snag a great deal.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that understanding the sublease completely changes how you should look at your own commercial lease. And it boils down to a really important question for your business. Is your lease just a dead weight, a fixed cost you're stuck with? Or can you see it as a flexible, strategic asset, something you can use to save money and adapt to whatever the market throws at you? How you answer that question could literally change everything.